Namaste, Jai Shri Krishna. Welcome back in our Dharma Talk. Today, Dharma Talk, we having our guest. Our guest don't need any formal introductions, any kind of the formal formalities because she is well known in our Dharma Talk. She is very good speaker and she always give a good advice in how to handle ourselves in these difficult situations as we have made it ourselves is difficult. But anyway, uh, not to go into the too deep into the explanations and making understanding and everything, otherwise it's going to become a my talk, it's not going to become a her talk. But we all of us know her very well. She is Atishca Ben, and then she is a well-known speaker, and she always give useful tips for my viewers, our Dharma Talk viewers, and also at large in a different platform too. So not to waste too much time and not to take too much out of time off from you, let me just introduce her, and then I think she don't need any introductions. So I will ask her to start her talk, and then let's our viewers to be understand what the different angle of the dharma. So, Atishka Ben, the platform is yours.
Practitioner, as well as a bereavement guide. I'm really excited to be chatting to you about something that's so close to my heart and something that I'm so passionate about, and that is grief. And I know it can be a really hectic topic. I know that it can bring up a lot of different emotions, but hopefully today I'm able to answer some of your questions, just to be able to understand the process better, as well as to have a better understanding of how it is that we can support those who are going through trauma and grief. So most people associate grief as the loss of a life, the loss of a pet, the loss of something tangible, something that's living and breathing. Whereas people don't normally identify grief with the loss of other things. So, for instance, due to COVID, what we've had to experience is a loss of income, a loss of employment, um, loss of choice, having the choice to be able to go out and do something, loss of human comfort, as well as the loss of power, the ability to affect change. We aren't that powerful person that's sitting in a boardroom anymore. So, grief comes in many different forms. It's the loss of a lot of things, but at the same time, it is also the loss of the things we've expected. So, for instance, when it comes to things like infertility, for instance, or being able to adopt a child and things like that, there's a certain level of grief that comes with that as well, because you've expected stuff, you have imagined this whole reality that's supposed to take place, and now all of a sudden it isn't there, it's not going to be there, and there's a definite layer of grief that overpowers everything around those type of situations as well. The things that people are experiencing right now, including immigration, moving to another province, moving to another country, the loss of life that you've had, the loss of time with family, all of those things are grief related. And most people don't necessarily know that those are the feelings they're feeling, because of the fact that we were always taught that grief is when I've lost someone and someone's died. During my personal grief journey, there were so many emotions that I felt that I didn't even have a name to attach it to. I went through extreme anger. I went through frustration. I went through depression, the anxiety of everything around me, the fear of not having my dad as my protector, that kind of conflict came through. So, emotions that are related to grief are so varied. And the one thing that people need to identify and understand is that it can all occupy the same space in you, and that's perfectly fine. There is no trajectory around what is right and what is wrong in the grieving process. And I think a lot of people feel like if they had to go through the 5 stages of grief, that there's some endpoint to it, but there actually isn't. And you can feel all emotions at the same time. You can be happy, hurting and healing at the same time, and that's perfectly fine. So don't feel as though grief is supposed to be just this heavy sadness, depression, that's the only feeling that you're going to have. You are going to have so many more, and no one tells you this. They all expect you to get over it. They all expect you to be fine around it. But you can be every emotion under the sun in one day, and that's perfectly fine. And it's actually very, very normal. I think if I had to have people giving me tips and tools during my grieving process, I would probably not have listened to any of them because I was feeling so many things at the same time. But in my opinion, and obviously because of my experience, my personal experience, the tips that I have around how to deal with it is that, firstly, I understand there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is so personal to them that whatever they choose to do, however they choose to do it, is perfectly fine, because in that moment it makes them feel okay. The second tip that I would have to say is that don't be afraid to reach out for help. It took me 2 years before I started seeing a psychologist. It took me enough time for me to realize that I actually needed to say something about how I was feeling. I needed to speak to people, because what happens in the grieving process is that the people you would normally turn to, your immediate family, are the ones you don't want to feel as though you're burdening. You don't want to make them feel as though your life is falling apart, because it's also your job to hold everything together. And that is the hardest thing you can do, is when you're stuck in the middle of trying to be this person who's strong and at the same time you are actually falling apart. So find your tribe. Find the spaces where you feel safe enough to talk about what you want. Find the spaces where you can be yourself and just exhale around the entire thing. I couldn't find that space. I created it. I created the Active Grief community for the purposes of having a space to talk to people about what I was feeling, to allow other people to share with me, so that at least I felt normal, that the things I was going through wasn't just me. There was other people who understood. And that is the type of thing that you need to be able to look for, is that it's absolutely okay. It's actually necessary to find the people that you can talk to, so that you are able to exhale and let those feelings out. So definitely, second tip would have to be find your tribe, because there's more of us out there than you realize. We don't wear badges. We don't tell people we're grieving, but we all have those emotions and those thoughts, and it's perfectly okay for us to just share and talk about it. One of the other tips I have around dealing with grief and managing trauma is try not to do life-changing decision making in that time. It becomes very, very difficult when you are dealing with complex emotions and you literally feel as though you're not yourself, but you have to make very life-changing decisions. So for instance, I left my job in corporate partly because I was going through burnout, but also because of the grief process. I did not want to be around people. I felt like I needed to just be away from everything and find time for myself to go through healing. And in hindsight, maybe I wouldn't have just left without having another job, but at the same time, I had to realize that you're going through these things, and there are definite triggers in the grief process that are going to cause you to make some sort of decisions that you might not be comfortable with later on. So another tip is definitely going to be try not to make life-changing decision making, because your decisions need to come from a place of emotional stability, and it needs to be thought of logically as well. Your intuition is great, follow that, but at the same time allow yourself the space to understand what you're going through in order to make a better informed decision later on. What kind of happens when we don't deal with grief is that we become very numb. That's exactly what happened to me. So the first year after my dad died, I went into autopilot. I was trying to be as functioning as possible, and I was, going through the usual stuff. I was back at work, doing admin, making sure everything's fine. In our culture, we have different ceremonies after every few months, and that kind of kept us going. But after the first year, when all the firsts kind of happened, the first Father's Day the first, birthday the first, Christmas the first, everything. I had to crash, and I crashed really, really hard, because what I realized was that all emotions entered through the same door. By me closing the door, trying to block out the bad emotions, I literally blocked out any good emotions from coming in, and I was in a constant state of numb. I was on antidepressants, I was on all these weird and wonderful things, and literally numb was the one feeling that was the most constant. And by not dealing with it, the anger was there, the frustration was there, and all of those different emotions, until they actually started manifesting as physical illness in me. My hair, my skin, my body, everything was just going crazy. There was just nothing of me that I recognized anymore. And not dealing with grief, it's like the first thing you have to identify is, for all of the different types of grief, understand that grief is okay. It's a part of life. It's something that's universal. Everyone's going to experience it, because I blame myself. Like, how could I feel so bad? There's a lot of worse things happening in the world, but I actually feel like my world is falling apart. And that's the truth, because to me, it felt like it was falling apart. And relationships were starting to get, really, really difficult. There was just so much going on until I took the time to figure things out for myself, to identify that I've changed. Trauma changed me, and there was no going back to the person that I was before. I literally had to understand that for me personally, the old me, the one that was so naive, the one that thought the world was so amazing, had to experience this part of grief in order to understand that I needed to appreciate myself, my life, and those around me a lot more than I was. And that is the one thing that I ended up taking out of the grief process. If you have to think about it, right? The things that people most commonly say, because they're trying to offer some sort of comfort, is that they're in a better place. Really? How do you know that they're in a better place? How can there be any better place other than by my side? So try to avoid things like that, because literally, as much as the person who is grieving is trying to hold a straight face, they actually do feel like punching you. But we appreciate that people don't know what they don't know. But the person's in a better place, avoid that, because literally there is no better place than by the side of someone who loves you. The other thing that people commonly say is, I've seen this commonly happen to people who have lost a child, and what they say is that, at least you can have another one. Or even worse is that you've got other children, so you're perfectly fine. How can people honestly feel like what they're saying is how offering you comfort? Everyone's children is different. Everyone's children is unique. There's definitely no right way of saying anything around this issue, but if there isn't something that you can say, try to say nothing at all, other than it's okay to feel how you're feeling, and I'm here to support you, and I will be here to help you through it. But don't offer platitudes that you've seen on TV or that you've read somewhere and stuff like that, because those things honestly do not apply. So yeah, those are two of the main ones that I've kind of seen come across. But then there's also on the flip side is that if someone hasn't experienced extreme grief, they kind of go into this comparison mode of, I'm so sorry your mom or your dad or your husband, wife, whatever has passed on. I lost my pet last month, and I understand what you're going through. Crickets. Like, the person grieving has no words to say other than thank you. It's okay. But try to avoid things like that. Grief is not a competitive type of discussion. Just because they've lost a person doesn't mean it's equivalent to your pet or it's equivalent to a child or any of those things. Avoid saying things like that. It really becomes really difficult as the person who's grieving to hear those things and to still feel like, how do you think that what you've said is okay? And it comes from a very, very angry space after that. So, I think those are the things that I would hope somebody would avoid saying in future. Who knows? Maybe I can change one or two people's dialogues. There are a lot of positives that can come out of the grief process, and I know in that moment it feels horrible and it feels crazy, and you really don't want to be a part. You just want to get out of it. You just want the end point to come through, and you want it to come through really fast. And the positive that's come out of it for me is that I firstly realized that I was living a life where I was simply existing. I was following the normal trajectory of life. I wasn't investing enough in myself, in my self-growth, in the things that I wanted to do, because all I thought was that I had time. Of course we think we have time. We schedule meetings for tomorrow because we think we have time. And a lot of the things that I really wanted to do with my life, I never did, because I always thought I've got time, I'm working towards a goal, things are going to change. I will get to what I need to get to eventually. And after the death of my dad, it was literally a smack in the face, which is like, what are you doing with yourself? Why aren't you taking better care of yourself? Why aren't you understanding that you have so much more to give and to offer to people, and you're just holding back on everything? And that's when my life changed completely, because the good that came out of it was that I had to reinvent myself. I had to reintroduce myself to myself, because the old me was everything I wanted to be, but the new me was everything I needed to be for myself and for those around me. One tool that I used during my grieving process was called emotional freedom techniques, or tapping. And what it is that it's a mix between Chinese acupressure as well as modern psychology. And the whole point around it is that you want to be able to acknowledge how you're feeling. You want to be able to say out loud that this is the feelings that I have in my body, and I want to be able to shift out of that state. I want to feel lighter. I want to feel happier. I need to allow these feelings and these thoughts and all of those different mushy stuff to just come out of my chest, because all I felt was just this heaviness all the time. And tapping is actually it's so easy, and it's such a simple tool to use, and it's so powerful, because you are able to firstly acknowledge how you're feeling, but then to be able to shift it and allow your emotions to feel better. Basically, you just end up feeling better. And it's a bit more complex than just the simple tapping, because there are other techniques that go along with it. And once I started using that tool, I basically realized that that is something that I want to do. That is something I want to share with people, and I became a practitioner of it. So now I'm actually an emotional freedom technique practitioner, allowing people to do this process with me. And it's an incredible tool, and all I can say is that if you want to give it a try, just do it at least once and experience it, because it is something that you will be able to pass on to others in order to create more emotional stability in your life. Even though the situation is not ideal, in this moment it's okay, and in this moment I'm okay. Top of your head. Even though the situation is not ideal, in this moment it's okay, and in this moment I'm okay. Top of your eyebrows. Even though the situation is not ideal, in this moment it's okay, and in this moment I'm okay. Side of your eye. Even though the situation is not ideal, in this moment it's okay, and in this moment I'm okay. Under your eye.
We apologize for these technical matters which has been raised through the internet. We all of us know, but the part which she has already has mentioned about it, that very important part which is we all of us need to understand is you need to talk. You need to come out from your so-called technical comfort zone. You need to speak out. You need to express yourself towards your loved ones, towards your close ones, and then you will be able to help yourself. Sometimes we feel shy. Sometimes we feel um, very, if I use the word called very controlled, and those are the things doesn't help us. And therefore, in many occasions, in many my lectures, I have said, and I'm repeating again, at any stage, at any level, you feel there are the spiritual leaders, there are the spiritual personalities, there are the people who knows how to handle these emotions based matters and how to make you help. Go to them, speak to them, and definitely we all of us one day we will be understand these matters, because no use to keep it within and wasting the so many days, months, and years. By the time we come out from these difficult zones, we will realize how much we have lost. And therefore, it's very important. Life teach us through the rivers is move on. Life has to move on. River continuously flow because river have to merge into the ocean. So we are, our life is like that. One thing we must remember, time don't wait for anybody, nor our age. So think about it. And if you need help, you can contact Atishca nicely, and then she will help you. And people like us also available. You can contact us anytime. And one of the biggest tool is Bhagavad Gita. 14th December, we are having a Bhagavad Gita Jayanti celebration. You can join us in the Bhagavad Gita Jayanti, where the Bhagwan Sri Krishna has helped to the Arjun. But when Arjun went to the Krishna, when Arjun asked this question to Krishna, then Krishna helped. That is one of the biggest tool in our life, how to come out from the stress, depression, anxiety, and not only stress, depression, anxiety, but from the grief too. So make a Bhagavad Gita as a primary in our life and celebrate Bhagavad Gita Jayanti on 14th December, and join us also in our celebrations. Till that, we will see you Friday evening on our astrological talk, weekly predictions, solutions, remedies. Perfect 100% based on scientific ways. And if you're looking how your 2022 will go, you can contact me. There is a we will consult, we will have a consultation process, and then you will become to know okay, how the 2022 will be coming in your ways, in your life. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you Friday evening. O ईश्वर भजिए तने मोटू छे तुझ नाम अंगुण तारा नित्य गाइए थाय अमारा काम हेत लावी हसावतुं सदा राख दिल साफ भूल कदी करिए अमे तो प्रभु कर जो माफ ओम देव शांतिरंतरिक्ष गुम शांति पृथ्वी शांतिरापः शांतिरोखदयः शांति वनस्पतयः शांतिर्विश्वे देवः शांति ब्रह्म शांति सर्वगुम शांति शांतिरेव शांति श्यामा शांतिरेधि Om Shanti 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 Bhavatu. With some technical reason, we can't connect to back to the Atishca Ben, but we will have to thank you to her, and then we'll call our next guest next week Tuesday.